was hoping that we'd spend a little time talking about the COVID bill and what's covered and what isn't, and what good or not so good it's going to accomplish.
Okay, you guys are live, so you know.
Okay. Hello, everyone who's watching. This is the Old Farts, subtitled Adventures in Technology. Hopefully things will stay together for the next hour. We have a crew of Paul Bina, Omanon Cole, Pat Moreno, and Bob Krieg. And we're going to have a discussion for an hour.
That's a lot of eminence.
Well, you have to recognize Bob is ordained person, so he's the high eminence.
He is the big umpire.
Yeah, he's the high eminence.
I am actually, my title is Pastor Prime, or I should say Pastor Prime, because I did a wedding a few years ago, and I was really excited. I was telling my daughter about it, and the daughter said, "What do you want to be called?" And I'm saying, Pastor Robert or something like that. And she said, "No, you're Pastor Prime." So I've got calling cards that I hand out to everybody.
And you are really officiating. You do officiate.
Yes, people try to slap me down for that, but
no.
What this is the first time we've gotten together since the inauguration, and a couple of things that have happened and are going on as we speak. There was a minor dust up at the Capitol. There's an impeachment trial going on, and we're attempting to get COVID relief, among other things. If somebody has heard anything about what's going on outside of the continental United States, a minor detail, I forgot about COVID. I would be interested in hearing about it, because if you listen to the news, there's no mention. It's as if the United States exists in a vacuum.
We are the world. At this moment, we are the world. I think my guess is that most of the world is paying attention, undue attention to what is going on in America. It has been that way for some time, but I think it's even more so now. An interesting thought is, what do we project with regard to this impeachment and what has happened? What do we project with regard to democracy as such? And I think it's a little bit difficult, and I think most of you know where I would come in on the topic, so I am not going to expatiate in any way. I'd be happy to talk to you individually. I think you probably have, I know Bob, you do, because we exchange emails. You have a pretty good idea of where I stand. So I don't think it's right to bring that out. However, in general, what can I say about the impeachment trial that is true? I don't know. I really don't know. This is a very special moment, and my most sincere hope is that this does not destroy or even taint American democracy for the future. I have my doubts, but I don't want to get into them. I would prefer to hear from you. What do you think? I don't want to call on anyone. I don't want to feel like I'm but what are your thoughts?
I was listening on the radio, all of the leaders of countries we do not respect, Iran, Russia, China, and several others, say that
Sorry?
you know
Thank you.
we're hypocritical. We in China they showed Hong Kong and DC, and and they look pretty much the same. Um, the people rising up for democracy in China, and the people in DC rising up against duly elected president, and it's just really embarrassing.
I totally agree that that's going to be a long-term problem. We're going to have a great deal of trouble, certainly in public, if not in private, saying that the population has a right to self-determination when on TV, all you see is 6 hours of people ransacking the government, looking for people to kill. And I think that that's very meaningful. A question I had for Pat, I don't know that necessarily everybody in the audience, the 2 or 3 people who are watching, knows your background, but one of the questions I have is, why do you not think that the election was decided accurately?
It sounds like you're baiting me.
No, actually, well, to some extent, yes, I am.
Let's hear from Onan first.
Yeah.
All the different states went through extended analysis of what they did, vote counting, and et cetera, and they all pretty much said, this is what happened, this is what it is. And it seemed that Trump would not accept it, and he still hasn't accepted. At least he hasn't voiced acceptance of it. Pennsylvania went through, and they did indeed find 4 dead people voted. They were all wives of Republicans. The 4 dead wives voted, and but those are the only ones they found. And they didn't find 100,000. They only found 4. Now, clearly, there's small amounts in every state were probably miscounted, but not enough to change the tally in the state. And when Trump called the governor of
Georgia,
Georgia, and told him to find 11,870 votes, that's a felony. And telling them to manufacture votes that weren't there, because they had counted them 3 times already. So and he kept telling people that the election was stolen, and it wasn't. And
Omanan?
Yeah. What I when I vote, I usually, or not usually, when I vote, I see all the candidates listed on the ballot. And so what happens when I vote? I also have senators, I also have congressmen on the same ballot. Now, this is what I don't understand, is that if Trump's votes got stolen and he lost, how come all those congressmen, Republicans, won? Why can't we nullify all those as well at the same time? And the senators Republicans who won. So that's why I kind of am in a bind to make to side with this idea that only Trump's was stolen. I would say that all the other people's also got stolen. But what is fascinating to me, and that all those Republicans won. So shouldn't we nullify those also? And nobody rose against that, and that's what bothers me. Why didn't people rise against them? Just only against one person. So that's what I don't understand. And so then you find, not looking at the election result, but looking at how uh, people were running around in the Capitol building and yelling and and speaking out, "Where are you, Nancy? We want to get you." I mean, this is a recording. Where are you, Nancy? Where is Mike Pence? Let us go and get him. So it's kind of bone chilling scenario, no matter which side you are on. And then you have all the people hiding. It's kind of pathetic that this shining hill, we call, here we have people who are our representatives and senators. They're hiding. So that's where I stand. Without looking at the partisanship there, it's kind of, I find when the whole world actually used to look towards United States. I look towards United States as the beacon of light. And here we are. So I don't know what to make of it. And so that's what I have to say there.
Um, I have another observation which bothers me, and that's during this impeachment, basically it is a trial, and the senators are required to stay in their seats, and yet up to 10 senators were not there. And I thought that was I thought that that was yet another felony not to be in the room. It just bothers me, this whole thing.
Was it momentary,
No,
Bob? I mean,
no, these are empty seats for a long period of
permanently
time.
empty. That's interesting.
Well, but they may have gone to the bathroom.
Yeah,
They have
no,
breaks.
Oh, they have breaks.
Yeah, they do
Every-
have, they have organized breaks, yeah. I have a question. It seemed, or an observation, I should say, it was very strange, I thought, that America elected Republican congressmen, almost to the extent where the number chosen was equal. It almost split the House in half, came close. And I
Yeah.
understand there are still some questions that are out there that have yet to be answered, tallies. And yet
No, so
the presidency, and it
decided-
has been, I'm pretty sure it's been shown historically that when you vote for the House or for one party, you tend to, this has been a historical truth. The president usually comes out in the same party. This was an anomaly that I find difficult to accept. In addition, okay, I'll
Yeah.
reserve my
No,
addition
no,
for a moment.
say there's a very simple answer to your question.
Hmm.
It has not been for, I don't know, let's say 80, 90 years since there was as polarizing a candidate for president as we had with Donald Trump. And I think the answer to your question is a lot of Republicans voted against Donald Trump. And that's how you can say that half the country voted for the Republicans in Congress, but Trump lost by, what was it, 7, 8 million votes.
Yeah, 7. I think it's 7.
Okay.
About 7 million.
And maybe that's why Trump is so angry, because it's a direct repudiation of him as an individual. But the reason I brought up, I'm sorry, the reason I brought the thing up was if it is reasonable to assume that that Donald Trump lost the election and Biden won it, then what is the justification in a democracy for trying to stop the certification of that victory? Because the key to a democracy, any democracy, is the peaceful transfer of power. And when somebody attempts to prevent that from happening, that's the coup that that Donald Trump has been talking about for 4 years. And so if again, if there was no democratic justification for the attack on the Capitol and the attempt to stop the transfer of power, then what is your attitude towards what actually happened? I mean, the fact that people died and people were hurt, etc. Was there a justification, a good justification for that happening, or was it purely an attempted coup? And once we decide if it was an attempted coup or not, then we can talk about whether, in fact, the appropriate people are being punished or about to be punished.
I believe that the election and it has been substantiated to some degree. I believe it was stolen. And you will
In what way?
say that's foolish and how can you prove it? There has been, because of the nature of the virus, the dispersal of votes, the inability to check votes. There have been enormous questions which Trump and his group have raised with regard to, I'm sure that all of you have seen scenes on television where there have been serious questions that have not been answered with regard to, and insofar as the entire scheme of mailing in votes is, I think, still in question. I think most people, like yourselves, the Democrats, would or have decided that the election was straight and forward. And I am not here trying to sell a party. I'm here to say that I think we have a very serious problem with the way we vote. There are too many ways to cancel, change the whole notion of, and this is the result of the virus in large part. And I think that for future elections, something else must be devised, a more secure system, because I believe there was countless numbers and there were cases that were clearly pointed to. You may or may not have heard of them. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yep, go ahead, Bob.
I didn't hear them. I didn't hear of them. I've heard a lot of innuendos, and most of the things that I've heard were explained away. Now you talked about the votes being cast, and Hillary Clinton won by 4 million votes, the general election, and and the House, they was expanded to 230 something versus 200, and in this election it got a little bit closer, but the other person won. So your theory about usually when people vote, that they tend to vote and that president wins. Well, the Republicans for president have lost 7 of the last 8 elections, every 4 years. I think the last, other than Reagan winning, I think it was Reagan winning his second term or something like that. Only Bush 2 won his second term. All the other ones in between, the Democrats have won the popular vote, not necessarily the House or the Senate, but and I think the other thing I think is that maybe Trump takes too much credit for what Mitch McConnell did. He brags about 3 Supreme Court justices. He happened to be president while 3 vacancies were open, and the Republican Senate had the majority, and they put them in. So, I think Republicans who say, "Oh, Trump did that," well, he happened to be president at the time. If Mike Pence had been the president at that same time, it would have been exactly the same thing. And yes, the Republicans did better. They closed, 10? When they win 10 and the Democrats lose 10, the difference changes by 20. So, excuse me, that's why it looks a lot closer now. And I think it also has to do with the gerrymandering in the states, and that has a lot to do with it. The districts. In Massachusetts, I'm sure is gerrymandered for Democrats, and other states they're gerrymandered for Republicans. In Pennsylvania, they're gerrymandered around the big cities, and it's not even. And I think that is probably the most important thing for the future, is to get rid of the gerrymandering, have it done by computer, and create a program that just does it by location, not strange looking locations of, a big, instead of being a circle, it's like a semicircle with one, with one narrow strip going way out into some other territory. you've seen those. So I think that's, that does have to be corrected in the thing is that the other thing is that certainly the Republicans have no interest whatsoever in having in getting rid of the electoral votes, because the way it's set up, they benefit greatly by the number of states, and the representatives are set up, and then you have the senators. Those are added to the group, and there are more states with Republican senators than there are with Democratic senators, and so that gives them an advantage in the electoral voting. So if it had been just simply popular vote like most elections are, the Democrats would have won 7 of the last 8. So the
You
other thing is, I
definitely-
think both sides have to meet in the middle as opposed to being on the extremes. There's the vast majority of Americans are in the middle, and it's the extremes that get all the notoriety.
But my question is that if my question is, given that the Republican secretaries of state, they certified all the electoral votes in many of the states, was the insurrection justified? Was that the only thing an outgoing president could invoke? That's what I don't have an answer to that. That's what perplexes me. How can you justify that part? Let us even accept that the election was stolen, but in a country which follows laws, which is supposed to be a country with rules and regulations and laws, how can one justify storming the Capitol, looking for people and killing those? I mean, that's what I cannot understand. Although the electoral votes were not certified by ABC, they were certified by duly elected secretaries of state who were also Republicans in some states. So that's what I don't understand that part. I do agree that some of the election laws may have to be changed to streamline those things. And maybe the machines may have to be looked at. Maybe the postal ballots, they need to be streamlined. But that means that is basically trying to get the electioning done much better than what it has been done so far. And because then when we go into other countries and we teach them how to go through balloting, how to really make sure there are people who do not vote twice, how to issue ID cards. In India, for example, they have issued ID cards for everybody. If you have an ID card, you are all set to go for elections, go to get your whatever things you got to get from government, open and even to actually get a SIM card, you need that ID card, because they need to find out who is buying it. In order to prove yourself, you have that card. You want to open a bank account, you show them that, that's it. Everything is digital and you don't have to do anything. Everything is taken care of. So I find something like that might be useful. It would be useful even here, although we have social security cards, but we don't use them as ID cards. And we have driver's license, but not everybody has a driver's license. So if there could be something national ID card system Why can't we have that? That would lay, that would put to rest a lot of stuff. But at the same time, I understand there is opposition to get ID cards. There will be people who say, well, these people don't deserve an ID card. They are less than human. I mean, that's what we need to square that away before we can create an ID card system. That's what I think.
Yeah, the other thing is that the ID card should be free. It shouldn't cost $35 or some,
Yes.
whatever. And the 14th Amendment talks about not states not making laws that are take away somebody's rights
Mhm.
without due process. And all these voter suppression laws, I know you're going to react to that term, but all these voter suppression laws really violate the 14th Amendment. And they need to do something about that.
So if you could
Bob?
streamline those, not have voter suppression, but have voter promotion, I think
Yeah.
I would like that. I think
Well, because Democrats vastly outnumber Republicans, they want to do something so that to even the playing field number wise. So they have to try to do something. One of it just reminded me about Detroit.
I turned the
Um,
Yeah, no, if for some reason, it must be the OBS.
Yeah, even if you mute it, you can still hear them.
Yeah.
you cannot mute. Oh, okay.
Yeah, once
No. Okay.
You were talking about Detroit.
Yeah, they were saying that there was too many people voted in Detroit. They cast what 100,000 ballots more than there were people, eligible voters. Well, as it turns out, I think it was like 400,000 people voted in Detroit, but they had 700,000 eligible voters. So, even though that information went out, it was definitely wrong, and people believed it. There's so many things that were said that were wrong that people believed.
And there was an issue. Omanon brought up mail-in voting, and for a while that was supposedly the fraud that the Democrats invented mail-in voting at the last minute to get their votes in. In most states, particularly in Pennsylvania, I know for sure, that was passed by the Republican legislature, the mail-in voting. And
Oregon's been doing it for more than a decade.
Washington's been doing it for at least that long, and they've been doing fine.
And Trump also votes like that. We used to vote like that.
Right. Because, I because of I happen to like going down to the polls and voting, but this last year we got a mail-in ballot. We filled it out. We took it down to the town hall where there's a drop box, and we put it in. And I don't think I was the only one.
No, you were not.
And okay, and it worked fine. The only places where Trump seemed to have problems, and the Republicans that I talked to, however few there may be, were in the big cities. So if there were Democrats who were voting in downstate Georgia, nobody seemed to complain about that. They complained about Atlanta, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh to some extent, Detroit. And that's where the people are. And oh, by the way, they tend to vote Democratic. They don't all vote Democratic, but they tend to vote Democratic for a variety of reasons. If you say it was stolen because look at all these votes that came from Detroit, and you invent a number of people who were eligible to vote, and you say, well, more of them voted, and then you find out, no, that's not true. One of the things that a person should do is say, oh, I was wrong about that. Let me look and see if there's anything else that might explain why Trump lost. And if you can't find something reasonable, then you say, okay, he lost this state. I was wrong. Then people will tend to believe more when you say this other one, that what I said before about Detroit and Michigan has nothing to do with what happened in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a different story, and these things did happen. People would tend to believe. But when you say this is wrong, and then it turns out it's right, and then you say, well, this is wrong, without any recognition that what was said before was incorrect, why should somebody believe it? And then add to it, this is something where Pat and I are going back and forth on email. Pat sends me emails detailing all the reasons why there was the votes were incorrect. Fraudulent, stolen, invented, done with a wrong pen, whatever. But when this was brought to a court to adjudicate it, that's what we do in our system. We don't, Pat and I work it out ourselves. We go to a court and say, okay, here are the facts as we understand it, and people have an opportunity to point out what may or may not be correct, and then the judge makes a decision. In every case, when the judge said, okay, show me, there would nobody would swear that what they were about to say was correct. In some cases, they would make there was one case, and I don't remember where it was, but it was perfectly done. The lawyer said the Republicans were not allowed to be in the room when the vote was happening, and that's against the law. So all kinds of shenanigans should happen. And the judge said, so you're telling me there was no Republican in the room? How many Republicans were in that room? And the lawyer said, more than zero. Now, this is the difference between a sworn testimony and allegations. I make an allegation that my next door neighbor owes me $1 million. They promised me the $1 million, and I want it, and I want it now. When I have to go to court and explain how this came about under oath, penalty of going to jail, the story may change slightly. Like, for example, I say, oh, never mind, and go off to the next court and try to see if I can con those people. That's part of what I was saying before. When you find out that you were wrong, or when you can't make a legal argument as to why you're right, it makes everybody question everything. And I'm sympathetic to the idea that things are not the way they should be. I may want them to be different than you want them to be, but I could be convinced that things aren't the way they should be and things could be improved. but not when people are allowed to A, make things up, and then B, bring their guns and their sledgehammers and their American flags to beat up people just doing their job, their responsibility. I lose all sympathy. By the way, that's
I
Go
just have I just have another question. Actually, this is if all the states where Biden lost and all the states where Trump won, what guarantee is there that all the votes that Trump won were really legal, and he won those states? What is why don't we doubt that? Why
Good
shouldn't
question. That's a very good question.
I mean, that's what the basics. If you look at it that way, why shouldn't that be doubted? And so, if we are doubting one part, you can't be selective. It's just like looking at the Bible. You either accept it is word of God or it's not. So that's where I have trouble getting on board with this argument. I agree that yes, we do need to reform, as we have been reforming for the last 230 years. We do need more reforms. We need better government. We need better mechanisms to prevent gerrymandering, as Paul pointed out, and have a better ID system or something like that to prevent. But then you have to judge this system equally rather than partial. That's what I would argue for, so that everybody is treated equally. And then if the judgment goes against you, that should you then take up arms and storm the Capitol? So that's where it's kind of strange place we are in right now. So, but we have to although I am also sympathetic to the idea that the Republican president is not there, but based on the data we got, he did get fewer votes at electoral college level. And so you can't then basically selectively say that this part is stolen. The portions I won them fair and square. They probably also stolen. So we have to kind of worry about it both ways. I don't know if I made sense, but that's
to add that. And that is, in 2016, the same states that are being disputed today were even closer in terms of the majorities. How do we know that there wasn't shenanigans going on 4 years ago that caused Trump to be president? Reportedly, everybody, including Donald Trump, were shocked the night of the election when it became clear that Trump was going to win.
Yes, that is true.
There's so much to be said here. I don't know where to begin. Those
All right.
the judges that you talked about who voted to not challenge the votes, and those have been but they were then passed to the Supreme Court. There are many cases before the Supreme Court currently. They have deferred them. They have put them off, understandably, I think, because for them to, this was now when Biden has already assumed office, he's in office, to change the election or even question the election at that point, I think is extremely difficult. So my understanding is that most of the cases have been put off to a future date. to be looked at.
Can I interject one thing? And that is that almost all of the cases that were presented were presented in state court to state judges, and they have been appealed to the state Supreme Court, which is the highest relevant court for this kind of a case. And the state Supreme Courts said no, they were decided correctly. So
However,
the ones that went to the federal Supreme Court were thrown out. I would like to have seen them decided simply because it's so easy to say, hey, you don't have any standing. You haven't suffered any injury, so therefore you have no standing in the court. I would like to have seen them decided because I think the answer would have been, you have not suffered any injury because it's that guy's business, the other state's business, how they run things. And if you allow, if you can impose your view on them and how they run their state, they can also impose their view on you, and the result is chaos and not the way the system was designed. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I think that, you know, when you lose in a lower court, you appeal to a higher court. If you lose in a higher court, then eventually you can appeal to the Supreme Court. The problem was when the reason they lost all these cases, was that 72 out of 73 cases, is when they came to court, they didn't have any data for to be analyzed. They wanted the court to analyze the election. They didn't have any data that said what they were proposing was correct or incorrect. They just wanted the court to do investigation, and the way the way lawsuits work is you have to come in with data so that the judge can say whether it's whether it's a valid thing, and you're supposed to have already done the legwork. What they did by coming in without data was they were risking their law licenses, because that's one of the stipulations in that when they do go to court, they have to have data so that the judge can say whether there's enough data in order to proceed. They said, you know, they were saying basically, I'm paraphrasing, they were saying basically the count was wrong, and so the judge asked them, well, in what way was the count wrong? Well, that's what we want you to find out. And you know, that was their answer. You need to do discovery. The judge doesn't do discovery. The people who do this, who propose the lawsuit, they're the ones that have to show data in their discovery. They didn't have any discovery. They did it 72 out of 73 times. They came with no data, just a feeling. And that's why all those lawsuits were thrown out. So then they can go appeal to a higher court, and the higher court says, well, the lower court threw it out because there was no data. I'm not even going to hear it. So they lose that one. So then they try to go to the Supreme Court. That's why the Supreme Court hasn't really done very much, because they don't have any data to show. It's basically it's an inference that he couldn't have lost by that many votes. That's what I understand it to be.
To that, actually, you have Justice Scalia, when Al Gore lost, they put a stop to this counting. And that was it. And remember that Al Gore's.
Yeah, that
but
ruling said,
sure.
that ruling said that, that, was it Bush?
Bush.
Any delay would be detrimental to Bush's presidency,
Yes.
and so that's why they put a stop to the counting. And
But
that
what
counting was within, a
Couple
100 or so.
hundred.
These countings are within thousands.
Yes. But what
There
I
was
was going to what I was going to point out is that, but although Gore was judged against, but Gore did not start an insurrection.
Right.
He conceded, and that's what one would have expected. I'm sorry,
Well,
Bob, I interjected there.
If
Oh,
you
that's fine.
if you look at, I was watching the impeachment trials, and Trump, as far back as August, was preparing for this. He was saying, he was encouraging these at least seven white supremacist groups to go to battle for him physically. When he said to the Proud Boys, stand back and be ready, or whatever.
Stand back and stand and stand by.
Stand by and be ready, yeah. But he was setting it up as far back as August, what they would do. And
Can I throw out an idea? We only have a couple more minutes, and I wanted to talk about some other things, but that's not going to happen.
yeah,
I
why
think
don't we
that
talk about the other things? I think we've beaten this one to death. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
the COVID, what do we think is going to, in 2 years, when the majority of the population will have had a vaccine, and we'll know how long that takes and whether it needs to be done every year or every 6 months or whatever we learn over time that requires. What is life going to be like? Are we still going to be wearing masks? Are we going to be going to theaters, basketball games? I got basketball tickets I haven't used in over a year and probably will not use this year. What are we going to go to restaurants, etc.? What is life going to be like?
Nobody
I don't
has
think you're
any comment. I guess the only thing we can say is that just like there are now variations to the COVID, that some are responses to the vaccine and others are not. There'll be something else that comes along, and
Well,
we'll have to worry about that.
are
The
there
other
gonna
thing
be-
is that not everybody is willing to take the vaccine right now.
saw a headline that said 1/3 of the population will not take the vaccine.
Wow.
I think all the panel is taking or is about to take the vaccine, but there's a third of the population which, for one reason or another, is not willing to take it. How does that affect what you're going to be doing? Are you going to be wearing masks this summer?
Probably you will. This
Well,
summer definitely. So that's what I would think. This summer definitely.
If
It
you've
will
had
make
the
very
vaccine, do you need to wear a mask? Omanat?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what did you say?
If you've had the vaccine, you know, if you have both shots, quote,
Yes.
do you have to wear a mask? Is it
Uh,
because you have the ability to infect other people?
Yes, yes, because you still can catch the virus and hand it over to other
Oh,
people.
okay.
That's the
So you can
problem.
catch it, but it's not going to be as serious for
Mhm.
you, but you can still infect other people.
Yes, that's the danger.
Okay.
That's why it's important that maybe 75, 80% of the population gets vaccinated to really create the herd immunity.
Oh, so only 20% will die.
Well, I hope not. But if that's why the idea is if you get 80% people vaccinated, you will have enough herd immunity to suppress the transmission so that the virus does not get a chance to mutate further. That's the idea actually, because
Oh, okay.
right
The
now the
mutation.
infection
Yep.
rate is high, so more people are getting infected, more chances of mutations, more variants show up, and that is the danger. Excuse me. That means new vaccine may have to be created, and that's what companies are trying. And good thing is the new technology allows that to happen faster.
Uh, Have the, I think, but I'm not sure, have they approved the AstraZeneca, and does that have somewhat of a different target?
uh, Astras, no, it is they are using the same target in different ways.
Okay.
The only
So,
the,
Yeah, it's not effective against the African variation, right?
yeah, that's the problem actually.
well,
That's a problem variant right now. Less efficient, less effective, and so they can also the good thing about AstraZeneca is that you can actually transport that vaccine at regular refrigerator temperature. You don't need high fluting freezers.
so you can take it out to rural areas or into crowded crowded areas in cities, both
Yes,
of which seem to be underrepresented.
yes. And the same thing for Johnson vaccine. Johnson vaccine is supposed to be same thing. You can transport it easily, give it to people, prevents severe problems. Although the efficiency at the moment is not 95%, but it's high enough.
Hmm. I remember when they were originally talking, they were saying if they could get it to 50, they would love it.
Yeah.
And then to get 95 was a wet dream.
Yes. Well,
Um,
all that is, see, when they talk about 95% efficacy, they all are talking about just the number of people they vaccinated, and in comparison to that, those people who did not get vaccinated. And then
right.
I'm hoping they have controlled with respect to how people were moving around and adjusted the data accordingly. Because if you have all the people who got vaccinated and they stayed home, of course their efficacy will be higher in comparison to people who didn't get vaccinated and they're moving around normal, so they will get more infection. So then you compare the two, of course their vaccine is better.
Well, as I understand it, it's not a preventative to get infected. It's a preventative to keep you out of the hospital.
Yes, yes, all
So,
vaccines are going to do that. That's the hope.
so in the sense of wearing a mask, going back to the original question, you still need to wear a mask to prevent you from infecting someone else
Yes,
who did not get the vaccine. So
yes,
we're kind of back to the way it was last year when you wore masks to protect your fellow man, not yourself.
Exactly. So that's a good thing, actually. So you can prevent other people from getting sick. And hopefully other people are also wearing masks so that they don't make you sick.
Yeah, I remember seeing, there was an article saying that if you wore a well-fitting mask and the next guy wore a well-fitting mask, if one of you were infected, 95% of everything would be taken care of.